For the Sage Gallery, it was a story of impeccable taste and unwavering integrity carved into the art world by my father, Amara Sage. He spoke of it as if it were a lineage, a bloodline of beauty and commerce, stretching back through generations of imagined connoisseurs. But the truth is, empires are built on secrets as much as on stone, and I was the secret they buried, and my name is Amara Sage. Tonight was my brother Julian's coronation. A night 5 years in the making, held in the gleaming, cavernous heart of his new monument, the Sage Gallery's Julian Sage Pavilion. The name itself, lit in soft, confident gold against the building's glass and steel facade, was a declaration, a testament to the golden sun, the chosen heir. I stood across the street, a ghost at the gala, the city's indifferent hum a strange counterpoint to the thrumming in my own chest. The November air was sharp, carrying the scent of rain and exhaust, a gritty reality against the hermetically sealed perfection of the party. 5 years ago, they had thrown me into the fire to keep him warm. It was a calculated familial act of arson. They didn't expect me to walk out of the flames. They certainly didn't expect me to own the fire itself. From my vantage point in the shadows of a neighboring brownstone, I could see them all. My father, Marcus, his silver hair catching the light, his posture rigid with pride. He was a man obsessed with legacy, a concept he treated not as a living thing to be nurtured, but as a marble bust to be polished and displayed. My mother, Eleanor, drifted through the crowd in a gown the color of champagne, her smile a masterclass in social engineering. She was the family's enforcer of appearances, the one who smoothed over any wrinkle, any inconvenient truth with a silken touch and a will of iron. And Julian, my beautiful, charming, hollow brother. He was the center of it all, a human vortex of charisma, his laughter echoing even from across the street. He was born for nights like this. I was born for the silence that followed. A security guard with an earpiece and a bored expression gave me a cursory, dismissive look. My simple dark wool coat and plain leather boots marked me as irrelevant, a piece of the city's background noise. In his eyes, I was a nobody, perhaps a curious local or a disgruntled artist, loitering at the edges of a world I couldn't enter. He was right in a way. I was an outcast. I was not on the list, but I wasn't here to beg at the gates. They thought I was broken. They had left me for dead, professionally and personally, assuming I would simply dissolve. Fade into a cautionary tale they could whisper about at family dinners, a ghost of ambition gone wrong. They were wrong. I wasn't here to crash the party. I was here to end it. As if on cue, a soft chime interrupted my thoughts. A car, black and impossibly sleek, had pulled up beside me, its engine a barely audible purr that seemed to absorb the city's noise. It was a custom Lynk & Co. 09, a vehicle whose understated design belied its technological supremacy. The rear window, tinted to an opaque obsidian, rolled down with a whisper. I couldn't see the passenger, but a chauffeur in a severe dark suit emerged from the driver's side, walked around the car with crisp, economical movements, and opened the back door for me. He inclined his head slightly. "Ma'am?" I took one last look at the glittering pavilion, a monument built on my ashes. They were celebrating a victory they hadn't earned, a legacy built on a lie. I slipped into the cool, leather-scented interior of the car, the door closing behind me with a solid, satisfying thud that sealed off the world outside. The celebration, the family, the life that had once been mine, it all became a silent film, playing on the other side of the glass. My reflection stared back at me, her expression calm, precise, and edged with steel. They believed I was a ghost, haunting their triumph. They were about to learn that I was in fact the executioner. 5 years ago, the Sage Gallery was my world, not the glittering, public-facing world of champagne receptions and seven-figure handshakes that was Julian's domain. My world was quieter, more substantial. It smelled of old canvas, linseed oil, and the faint, sterile scent of conservation chemicals. My kingdom was the gallery's third floor, the provenance and authentication department. It was a place of science and history, of X-ray fluorescence, infrared reflectography, and the patient painstaking work of tracing an object's soul through centuries of receipts, letters, and catalogs. At 32, I was the head of provenance. It was a title my father had bestowed upon me with a faint air of concession, as if humoring a child's peculiar hobby. Amara has the academic mind, he would tell clients, a phrase that was both a compliment and a dismissal. It meant she handles the boring, necessary details. Julian is the one you'll enjoy talking to. And they did. Julian, 2 years my junior, was the gallery's sun king. He had our father's ambition, but none of his gravitas, which he replaced with a dazzling, almost liquid charm. He could sell anything because he sold himself first. He didn't know the difference between ultramarine and cobalt blue, but he knew the favorite champagne of every major collector on the eastern seaboard. He was a salesman, a brilliant one. I was a scholar. In the ecosystem of the Sage family, he was the orchid and I was the soil. Both necessary, but only one was ever put on display. Our mother Eleanor perpetuated this dynamic with a quiet, relentless pressure. "You should soften, darling," she'd murmur, adjusting a stray strand of my hair before a gallery opening. "You're so intense. It can be intimidating." To my mother, intense was a synonym for unfeminine. My passion for the hard empirical truth of my work was an unattractive quality, a social impediment. She wanted me to be a supportive backdrop for my brother, a muted harmony to his soaring melody. The foundation of our family myth began to crack the day the Tintoretto arrived. It was brought to us by a smooth, silver-haired Belgian dealer named Luc de Vries. The painting, titled The Agony of Saint Sebastian, was purported to be a lost early work by the Venetian master. It was dark, dramatic, and emotionally charged, everything a collector could want from a Renaissance masterpiece. It was also potentially worth a fortune. Julian was the one who'd found it, of course. He'd met de Vries at Art Basel and had been utterly seduced by the story the painting had been in the private collection of a minor Belgian noble family for centuries, undocumented, hidden away. The story was perfect. Too perfect. It's the one Amara Julian had declared bursting into my lab. His face was flushed with the thrill of the chase. "This is it. This is the piece that puts the Sage Gallery on the map permanently. We have a buyer already sniffing around the consortium that owns the Veyron Museum. They're talking 8 figures." 8. I didn't look at him. My attention was on the canvas under the articulated arm of my multispectral imaging system. For 2 weeks I had lived with that painting. I had mapped its every layer, analyzed its every pigment, scrutinized every inch of its canvas weave. "The feeling is right." Julian pressed on, pacing behind me. "Dad feels it too. It's got that power." "Feeling isn't a category in my analysis, Julian," I said, my voice flat. I swiveled in my chair to face him. "The data, however, is telling a very different story." The meeting was held the next day in my father's office, a grand wood-paneled room that overlooked Madison Avenue. It was less an office and more a throne room designed to intimidate and impress. I had my report, a slim but dense file filled with spectral graphs, chemical breakdowns, and historical inconsistencies. I felt like a cartographer trying to explain that the world was round to a king who insisted it was flat because it looked that way from his castle window. The provenance is anecdotal. At best, I began keeping my voice steady and professional. De Vries has no documentation prior to 1920, but the physical evidence is the real issue. I slid a high-resolution image across the polished mahogany table. Look at the blue in the sky. It's a stunning shade. But my X-ray fluorescence analysis shows it's an almost pure cobalt blue. The process for creating that specific stable pigment wasn't developed until the early 19th century. Tintoretto died in 1594. My father stared at the image, his jaw tight. Julian scoffed a short, sharp sound of derision. "Amara, you're drowning in data," he said, his voice laced with patronizing pity. "Artists experimented. Maybe he had a secret source. You can't dismiss a masterpiece because of one speck of paint." "It's not one speck," I countered, my patience fraying. "It's the entire sky. And there's more. The canvas weave." I pushed another file forward. "It's too uniform. 16th century Venetian sailcloth, which he often used, has a far more irregular thread count. This canvas is consistent with a 20th century mechanical loom. My analysis, I concluded, looking directly at my father, shows a 94% probability that this is a modern forgery. A brilliant one, perhaps, one of the best I've ever seen, but a forgery, nonetheless. Silence descended on the room. It was thick and heavy with disappointment and greed. My father templed his fingers, his gaze fixed on some point beyond me, out the window at the city that was his kingdom. I met the seller. Julian said, his voice now low and earnest, a performance for our father. I looked him in the eye. His family has had it for generations. The story is perfect. The feeling is right. We have a buyer offering a sum that would secure our family's future for the next 50 years. My father's eyes finally met mine. They were cold, devoid of the paternal warmth I had spent my life craving. Amara, he said, his voice quiet but absolute. Your job is to enable deals, not to kill them with doubt. Julian has the instinct for these things. I trust his gut more than your graphs. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle on me. We're moving forward. You will amend your report to reflect a positive authentication. Emphasize the stylistic strengths, the plausible deniability of the material analysis. Frame it as academic debate. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. In my family, facts were an inconvenience. Julian's instinct was gospel. I was the family's seatbelt, the kill switch, the emergency brake, and they were determined to cut me loose because they enjoyed the speed. I fought, of course. I sent memos. I drafted emails outlining my non-negotiable professional and ethical concerns. They were ignored. Julian cajoled, Eleanor reasoned, and my father commanded. The pressure was immense, a slow, crushing weight. In the end, under the threat of being ostracized and accused of sabotaging the family's single greatest opportunity, I did what they asked. I signed the authentication documents. I wrote a carefully worded, ambiguous report that was a masterpiece of professional equivocation. It was the most dishonest thing I had ever written. It was my signature on my own death warrant. The sale of the Agony of St. Sebastian was a triumph. The Veyron Museum Consortium paid $77 million. Julian was on the cover of Art World magazine, hailed as the wunderkind of the New York art scene. He was photogenic, eloquent, the perfect embodiment of a new, daring generation of gallerists. Our family celebrated at a lavish dinner at Percé. I sat among them, a silent accomplice, the taste of champagne turning to ash in my mouth. My father toasted Julian's unimpeachable eye. My mother squeezed my hand and whispered, "See, it all worked out. You just needed to trust your brother." I felt a cold dread coiling in my stomach. I wasn't just a ghost at the feast. I was the meal. The fallout came 3 months later. It began with a terse, formal email from the consortium, followed by a frantic call to my father's private line. The museum had conducted its own, far more extensive forensic analysis. Their findings were not ambiguous. They were conclusive. The painting was a forgery. A lawsuit was imminent. The press was about to be notified. The scandal would not just tarnish the Sage name, it would obliterate it. I was summoned back to the throne room. This time there was no pretense of debate. The air was frigid, the mood funereal. My father, Julian, and my mother were already there, seated around the mahogany table like a tribunal. They didn't even offer me a chair. The museum has confirmed our worst fears. My father began, his voice a low growl. He didn't look at me, but at the damning report from the consortium's labs that lay on the table between us. They are threatening to sue and go public. This will ruin us. He finally lifted his gaze, and his eyes were like chips of ice. Amara, you were the head of provenance. You signed off on the authentication documents. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it stole my breath. I signed off after you and Julian ordered me to. My voice was sharp, cracking with disbelief. I have the memos, the emails I sent you. My original report stated with 94% certainty that it was a fake. Julian, who had been staring at his hands, looked up. His eyes were wide with a sorrow so convincing it was a work of art in itself. It was a masterful performance. "Amara, I can't believe you're trying to do this," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't believe you're trying to blame me. I trusted you. You were the expert. I just brought in the deal. I believed in the painting because I believed in you." It was then that my mother spoke, her voice calm and measured the voice of reason, delivering a death sentence. "Your brother's reputation is the future of this family, Amara. He's the face of this gallery. A scandal of this magnitude would destroy him everything we've built." She looked at me, a flicker of something pity perhaps, or just cold calculation in her eyes. You're strong. You're resilient. You can handle this. You can handle this." It wasn't a vote of confidence. It was my designated role. The scapegoat, the sacrifice, the daughter they could afford to lose. Within hours, the family's lawyers had drafted a statement. Amara Sage, the overzealous and tragically mistaken head of Provenance, had been terminated for gross negligence. To add a layer of personal tragedy that would elicit sympathy for the family, they leaked a carefully crafted story to their contacts in the art press. I had been unstable, desperate to make a name for herself, and had staked everything on a reckless gamble, betraying her family's trust in the process. They didn't just fire me. They erased me. They excommunicated me from my own life, rewriting my history, with me as the villain and Julian as the noble, wounded victim of his sister's hubris. They handed me a torch and told me to set my own life on fire to keep the family warm. It was the last order I would ever follow. The professional world has a short memory for success and an eternal one for scandal. The name Amara Sage became poison overnight. My calls to colleagues went unreturned. My emails disappeared into digital voids. I was a pariah, the woman who had authenticated the infamous $77 million fake. The art world, for all its bohemian posturing, is a small insular village. The gossip spread faster than wildfire, and the story my family had so carefully crafted became fact. I lost my spacious Upper East Side apartment, the one with the view of the park. My life contracted, shrinking down to a cramped one-bedroom in Astoria, Queens, with a rattling air conditioner and walls so thin I could hear my neighbors' nightly arguments. The space was soon filled with books, stacks of them rising from the floor like stalagmites, my only companions in the suffocating silence. My credentials, my degrees, my years of expertise, they were worthless. I was a brilliant mind trapped in a cage of rumor. For 6 months, I drifted in a fog of shock and grief. The betrayal was a physical thing, a constant dull ache in my chest. It wasn't just the loss of my career. It was the severing of my identity. I had been Amara Sage, daughter-sister scholar. Now I was nothing, a ghost haunted by a life that was no longer mine. I would walk past the Sage Gallery on my way to pointless job interviews for positions I was laughably overqualified for and would never get. I'd see its gleaming windows and feel a phantom limb pain for the world I'd lost. One night, drowning in cheap red wine and self-pity, I was scrolling through an obscure online forum for art historians and conservators. A small-time collector from Ohio had posted a frantic query about a minor 19th century landscape he'd bought at a regional auction. He was worried he'd been duped. The JPEG he posted was low resolution, but I could see it immediately, the clumsy brushwork in the clouds, the anachronistic signature. It was a common, low-grade forgery, the kind that floods the lower rungs of the market. On a whim, fueled by wine and a flicker of my old self, I created an anonymous account. I chose the name Veritas, Truth. I wrote a short, precise, and utterly impersonal analysis of the painting, pointing out 3 specific tells. I explained how he could verify them himself with a magnifying glass and a blacklight. I signed off, shut my laptop, and thought nothing more of it. A week later, I logged back in. The collector had replied effusive with gratitude. My analysis had been spot on. He'd gotten his money back. But more than that, other users had chimed in. They were impressed by the clarity and confidence of the anonymous Veritas. Someone else posted a query about a piece of Sèvres porcelain. I answered that one too. Then another about a supposed Rembrandt etching. An idea began to form a tiny spark in the darkness of my exile. My family had taken my name, so I would forge a new one that stood for the one thing they had abandoned. Veritas became my secret project, my resurrection. I started a simple encrypted website, a forum, and a blog dedicated to exposing minor forgeries, art scams, and authenticating works for people who couldn't afford the Sotheby's and Christie's of the world. It was a pro bono underground operation run from my tiny apartment. I was no longer Amara Sage. I was V, a mysterious, faceless authenticator who was, according to the growing whispers in the art world's digital underbelly, never wrong. My solitude, once a prison, became my fortress. I wasn't just surviving, I was recalibrating, learning the new rules of a game I was going to invent. The online world didn't care about the Sage scandal, it cared about results, and V delivered. After a year, the reputation of Veritas had grown to the point where small anonymous donations started trickling in via cryptocurrency. It wasn't much, but it was enough to live on. It was enough to invest. I realized I couldn't do it all alone. The work was becoming more complex, the requests more high stakes. I needed a team. My first recruit was a woman named Anya Sharma. She was a brilliant forensic chemist who had been fired from a major museum's conservation lab for being, in their words, unwilling to be a team player. I knew what that meant. She was too principled. She refused to bend data to fit a desired narrative. I found her through a shared academic connection, reached out under the guise of Veritas, and offered her a proposition work for me remotely and anonymously and practice science without compromise. She agreed without hesitation. My second team member was Leo. I found him on a dark web forum discussing high-end security systems for art collectors. His handle was Magpie. From his posts, I deduced he was a retired art thief. His knowledge of gallery, weak points, transportation logistics, and the physical tells of a forgery from the perspective of someone who had likely created them was unparalleled. I contacted him, offering a substantial consulting fee in Bitcoin for his expertise on a hypothetical case. He was intrigued by the puzzle. He became my man on the inside my source for the kind of information you can't find in a textbook. He consulted on security, taught me how to spot a con artist's tells, and had a network of contacts in the art world's grimy transactional underworld. My final piece was a hacker who went by the name Rox. I needed someone who could trace digital provenance, uncover shell corporations, and navigate the labyrinth of offshore accounts where the art world's dirty money was washed. Proxy was a legend in white-hat hacking circles, a ghost in the machine who valued privacy above all else. I offered them the one thing they wanted, challenging, meaningful work that stayed completely off the grid. Anya, Leo, Proxy, and me. We were Veritas, a team of brilliant outcasts led by a ghost. The modest consultations turned into high-stakes, high-fee authentications for paranoid private collectors, small museums, and even insurance companies who needed a discreet second opinion. The money, once a trickle, became a river. I moved out of the Astoria apartment and into a secure, anonymous loft in a converted Tribeca warehouse. It was my home and my command center. The work was all done through encrypted channels. My clients never saw my face. They knew me only as V. They wired untraceable funds to a series of shell corporations I'd set up with Proxy's help, and in return, they received the one commodity that had become priceless in a world of smoke and mirrors, the truth. I had built a new life, a new identity, a new and formidable reputation on the ruins of the old one. I was no longer Amara Sage, the disgraced daughter. I was V, the founder of Veritas Global, a boutique firm whose name was whispered with awe and fear in the back rooms where real power was brokered. I was wealthy, I was powerful, and to the world that had cast me out, I was still invisible, and I was waiting. The news broke on a Tuesday morning, splashed across the homepage of ArtNet News. The headline was "Breathless Sage Gallery to Unveil Lost Caravaggio at Pavilion Opening Gala." I read the article, my coffee growing cold in my hands. The piece was accompanied by a professionally shot photo of my brother Julian standing beside a dramatically lit, shrouded easel. His expression was a familiar cocktail of smugness and manufactured reverence. He had, according to the article, made the find of a lifetime. A lost masterpiece by the volatile and brilliant Baroque master Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio. The painting, titled The Penitent King, was set to be the star attraction at the dedication of the Julian Sage Pavilion. It would be sold at a private auction during the gala, with early estimates soaring to an astonishing $150 million. My first reaction was not anger, but a cold, clinical certainty. It was a fake. I knew it in my bones. Caravaggio was one of the most imitated and forged artists in history, and Julian, for all his charm, had the artistic eye of a magpie, drawn to anything that glittered. He had learned nothing from the Tintoretto debacle, except perhaps that his family would always be there to clean up his messes. This wasn't just a deal for him. It was his magnum opus, the ultimate validation of the myth he and my father had constructed. For 5 years, I had built my fortress. I had sharpened my weapons. I had waited for the right moment, not with a thirst for vengeance, but with the patient resolve of a predator. And here it was. Julian wasn't just presenting a target, he was serving it up on a silver platter. I set my team to work. Anya began compiling a database of all known Caravaggio pigments and canvas materials. Leo started making quiet inquiries through his network about the painting's supposed origins, a dusty attic in a Maltese villa. Proxy began digging into the financial history of the Sage Gallery over the last 5 years, looking for cracks in the facade. 2 days later, I received an encrypted message through my firm's secure client portal. The sender was anonymous, but the request was direct and carried the digital watermark of immense power. It read, "Require immediate high-discretion consultation regarding an imminent 9-figure acquisition. Utmost confidentiality is paramount. Name your price." I knew instinctively who it was from. There were only a handful of individuals on the planet who operated with this level of clandestine authority and were rumored to be in the running for the Caravaggio. I replied with a single word when the meeting was set for the following evening. Not in an office, but on a private, neutral ground, the rooftop terrace of a closed-for-the-season hotel in the meatpacking district. When I arrived, he was already there, standing with his back to me, looking out over the glittering expanse of downtown Manhattan. Kaido Sterling was a legend, and like most legends, he was more myth than man. A reclusive, notoriously ruthless tech billionaire who had built his empire on predictive algorithms, he had turned his formidable intellect and bottomless fortune to art collecting in the last decade. He was known for his icy demeanor, his intolerance for failure, and his obsession with perfection. He turned as I approached, his movements sharp and precise. He was younger than I expected, perhaps late 40s, with piercing dark eyes that seemed to be constantly analyzing, processing data. "Miss V, I presume." He said, his voice a low baritone. He didn't offer to shake my hand. "I appreciate you coming." "Mr. Sterling," I replied, my voice equally cool. "Your message was intriguing." "I don't deal in intrigue," he said, getting straight to the point. "I deal in assets and liabilities. The world thinks the Sage Gallery is gold-plated. You and I know their foundation is cracked." He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "My sources are very good. They say you are Veritas, the ghost who tells the truth, the one they call when the stakes are absolute." I simply nodded, letting him lead. "I am the top bidder for the Caravaggio," he stated. "Julian Sage has been courting me for months. His pitch is flawless, his charm exhausting, but my algorithms flag him as a high-risk variable. And the asset itself, a lost Caravaggio, is a miracle. And I do not, as a rule, believe in miracles." He took a step closer, the wind whipping at his tailored coat. "Before I transfer 9 figures of my capital into his account, I want you to tell me if I'm buying a masterpiece or a memory. I want the truth. The empirical, undeniable, weapon-grade truth." His eyes locked onto mine. "I want you to infiltrate the gala, his inner sanctum. Get me what you need to be certain. Spare no one. The family name is irrelevant to me. The only thing that matters is the integrity of the asset. It was the perfect commission. A mandate for total war bankrolled by one of the most powerful men in the world. He was not just hiring an authenticator, he was hiring a weapon, and he was aiming me directly at the heart of my own family. "My fee will be substantial," I said. "Your fee is a rounding error," Sterling retorted. "Just bring me the truth." The game was afoot. Leo, my man of 1,000 faces, was the key. Through one of his contacts, he secured a position for a trusted associate on the gala's catering staff. This associate was a former sleight-of-hand artist named Elena, a woman who could palm a card, or in this case, a micro camera, without a flicker of notice. During a pre-gala setup, while the painting was being mounted in its place of honor, Elena, disguised as a technician polishing the protective glass, managed to do the impossible. In a moment of staged clumsiness, she dusted the ornate frame. In that split second, she did two things. First, she affixed a pinhead-sized, high-frequency micro camera to the bottom of the frame, giving us a constant close-up feed of the painting's surface. Second, with a tool disguised as a cleaning cloth, she scraped a microscopic, all but invisible sample of varnish and the top layer of paint from the painting's edge. The sample was smaller than a grain of sand. The sample was rushed to Anya's remote lab. For 48 hours, she worked her messages to me, becoming more and more excited. The chemical analysis was a treasure trove of damning evidence. The red earth pigment in the ground layer contained traces of synthetic iron oxides, not available until the mid-20th century. The varnish had synthetic resins that were a modern conservator's nightmare. It was, as I suspected, a masterful forgery. But then came the discovery that changed everything. Anya was running the live feed from the micro camera through a series of advanced imaging filters. "V, you need to see this," she messaged me. Her tone urgent. She sent me a filtered image file. I'm hitting it with a polarized light filter and running a quantum dot reader algorithm. Look at this section. To the naked eye, it's just a patch of dark shadow near the king's robe. I opened the file. The screen showed the dark patch of paint. Then, as Anya's filter was applied, something astonishing emerged. Glowing faintly like a phantom constellation was a minuscule, almost invisible anomaly. It wasn't a signature of paint. It was a string of code, a digital watermark embedded directly into the paint on a molecular level, using quantum dot technology. It was a technique I'd only read about in theoretical papers, a way for digital artists to sign physical work. It was the signature of a cyber artist and forger known only by the pseudonym Helios, a ghost I had been tracking for years. Helios was a genius, an artist who blended classical techniques with futuristic technology, creating forgeries that were almost impossible to detect by traditional means. "Proxy, are you seeing this?" I typed into our secure chat. Proxy's reply was instantaneous. "Already on it. It's not just code VI, it's a blockchain key." My blood ran cold. This was a new level of artistry and arrogance. "What does it link to?" I asked. For 10 minutes there was silence as Proxy worked. Then a link appeared in the chat. It links to a public, immutable ledger on the Ethereum blockchain, a smart contract. It's a certificate of inauthenticity. I clicked the link, and there it was. Julian hadn't just bought a fake painting. He'd bought a digital time bomb. The forger Helios hadn't just faked a masterpiece. He'd embedded its own confession deep inside it, a confession waiting for a key. The blockchain ledger was a meticulous record, the date the canvas was created 18 months ago. A list of the modern materials used, the hours spent on the work, and a final devastating message from Helios forever etched into the digital ether, a copy for the ages commissioned by JS Julian Sage. He hadn't been duped. He had been a co-conspirator. This wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate, monumental fraud. I looked at the evidence on my screen, a glowing testament to my brother's boundless criminal ambition. Helios had given me the key. Julian had given me the motive. And Cairo Sterling had given me the stage. The chess match was over. It was time for the checkmate. The night of the gala was cold and clear, the sky a black velvet backdrop for the city's glittering jewels. The Julian Sage Pavilion was a beacon of light and sound, a self-contained universe of wealth and influence. As Cairo Sterling's car purred to a stop at the curb, I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the detached focus of a surgeon before a complex operation. The years of anger, hurt, and exile had been distilled into this single, pure moment of purpose. I stepped out of the car. I was wearing a simple, impeccably tailored black dress, my only jewelry a pair of discreet diamond studs, a gift from Sterling, a quiet signal of his patronage. I walked towards the entrance, my heels clicking softly on the stone plaza. The warm, music-filled air from the open doors washed over me. At the velvet rope, a woman with a tablet and an imperious smile stopped me. "Name please, Amara Sage," I said, my voice even. Her fingers flew across the screen. Her smile faltered. She scanned again. "I'm sorry," she said, her tone shifting from welcoming to dismissive. "I don't have an Amara Sage on the list." She looked me up and down, taking in my understated dress, my lack of ostentatious jewelry. I did not look like one of them. Perhaps there's been a mistake. From the corner of my eye, I saw them. My family. They had been holding court near the entrance, and the sight of me had brought their conversation to an abrupt halt. Marcus, Eleanor, and Julian. They strode towards me, a phalanx of righteous indignation, their faces like thunderclouds rolling in over a summer picnic. Julian reached me first. His handsome face was contorted with a mixture of shock and contempt. "Amara," he hissed, his voice low and venomous, so the guests nearby couldn't hear. "What in God's name are you doing here? This is pathetic. It's a desperate, pathetic move." My mother glided to his side, placing a restraining hand on his arm, though her eyes on me were just as cold. "Darling," she said, her voice a silken weapon, "this is not the time or the place. You are embarrassing yourself, and us. Please, leave quietly." My father said nothing. He simply stood behind them, his face a mask of stone, his eyes radiating a disappointment so profound it was almost an act of violence. To them, my very presence was an act of aggression, a stain on their perfect evening. "Get out," Julian repeated, his voice rising slightly. "Before I have security, throw you out." The security guard from the entrance, the one who had given me the dismissive look earlier, began to move towards me, his hand reaching for my arm. "That won't be necessary." The voice cut through the tense air like a shard of ice. It was calm, commanding, and utterly absolute. Kaido Sterling had materialized beside me, flanked by two of his own security personnel, who were twice the size of the gallery's guard. He moved with an unnerving stillness, a center of gravity around which everyone else suddenly seemed to orbit. The buzz of the crowd nearest to us died down as people turned to stare at the reclusive billionaire. Sterling placed a hand gently on my arm, a simple gesture of possession and protection that spoke volumes. He ignored my family, completely addressing his words to the stunned security guard and the clipboard-wielding hostess. "She won't be leaving." He then turned his gaze upon my family. It was not a warm look. It was the look of a predator assessing a lesser species. "Ms. Sage is with me. She is my guest of honor." He let that sink in, the statement hanging in the air, charged with unspoken meaning. Julian's jaw went slack. My mother's smile froze on her face. My father's stony expression finally cracked, replaced by one of pure confusion. Sterling wasn't finished. He delivered the killing blow with the cool precision of an assassin. In fact, he announced, his voice carrying just enough for the surrounding guests to hear, "We were just finalizing the details this evening. Ms. Sage has accepted my offer to become the new head of acquisitions for the Sterling Foundation." The air crackled with the sound of a narrative shattering. In the space of 10 seconds, I had been transformed. I was no longer Amara Sage, the disgraced outcast begging at the gates. I was Amara Sage, the chosen expert of the world's most discerning and powerful collector. The whispers started immediately, a wave of speculation rippling through the crowd. My family stood there speechless, their faces a tableau of disbelief and dawning horror. They had written me out of their story, and now the most powerful man in the room was making me the protagonist of a new one. I gave them a small, cold smile. "Julian, Mother, Father," I said, my voice clear and steady. "It's been a long time." Then, with Sterling's hand still on my arm, I swept past them and into the heart of the party, leaving them standing in my wake, marooned on the shores of their own magnificent celebration. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of surreal encounters. People who had once cut me dead now approached me with tentative, sycophantic smiles. They spoke of my mysterious absence and my brilliant new venture. I moved through it all with a detached grace sterling, a silent, formidable presence at my side. Finally, the moment arrived. The auction for the penitent king. The room hushed as the painting was unveiled. It was, I had to admit, a stunning piece of work. The play of light and shadow, the chiaroscuro, was masterful. It radiated a profound, brooding energy. For a moment, even I could feel its pull. The bidding was fast and furious, a battle of egos played out in increments of millions. Julian stood near the stage, basking in the glow of his triumph. The price climbed 100 million, 120,140. Finally, with a decisive nod, Cato Sterling placed the winning bid. Sold, the auctioneer cried, for $150 million to Mr. Cato Sterling. The room erupted in applause. Julian's face was a mask of pure ecstasy. He had done it. He had scaled his Everest. He shook hands with my father, who clapped him on the back, his pride finally eclipsing any lingering confusion about my presence. Sterling, ever the showman, ascended the stage to say a few words. He took the microphone, the applause slowly dying down. A truly historic moment, he began, his voice resonating through the vast space. A masterpiece of the highest order and a testament to the unerring eye of Mr. Julian Sage and the Sage Gallery. He paused, letting the praise land, letting Julian soak it in. Julian practically glowed with self-satisfaction. But Sterling continued a subtle shift in his tone. For an acquisition of this historical and financial significance, my foundation requires one final public verification, a confirmation of authenticity from the very best in the business, a professional whose integrity is to me beyond question. He turned and gestured not to the gallery's hired expert, but directly to me. Ms. Amara Sage, please, if you would. A collective gasp went through the room. A spotlight found me. Every eye was on me. I saw Julian's face collapse, the triumph instantly replaced by a dawning, sickening dread. My mother clutched my father's arm. This was it, the public execution. I walked to the stage, my steps measured and confident. I felt 1,000 lifetimes away from the woman who had stood in this family's shadow. I took the microphone from Sterling. "Good evening," I began, my voice clear and amplified, reaching every corner of the silent room. I looked at the painting, then at my brother. The painting is beautiful, a masterful piece of theater. I paused, letting the word theater hang in the air. But it is not a Caravaggio. A tremor of shock went through the audience. Julian's face was ashen. It is a forgery, I continued, my voice devoid of emotion, a simple statement of fact. Created by the brilliant contemporary artist and forger known as Helios. And like all great modern artists, he signed his work. I nodded to Proxy, who was seated discreetly amongst the tech crew at the back of the room. The giant screen behind the stage, which had been showing a looping video of the gallery's collection, flickered to life. It showed a live, high-definition feed of the painting, then began to zoom in on the dark patch of shadow near the bottom of the king's robe, the exact spot my micro camera was focused on. To the human eye, this is simply shadow. I explained, my voice narrating the visual evidence. But with a simple polarized light filter and a quantum dot reader, which we are applying to the feed now, the image on the screen shifted dramatically. The dark patch of paint resolved into a new glowing layer of information. The microscopic string of code, the digital watermark, appeared shimmering like a secret message from the past. Helios embedded a blockchain token directly into the paint itself, I said, the evidence undeniable and writ large for all to see. This token, when activated by its public key links to an immutable public ledger. The screen changed again. Now it displayed the clean, irrefutable interface of the blockchain ledger. The data scrolled by canvas created May 12, 2022. Pigments, titanium white, synthetic iron oxides, phthalo blue, and then the final devastating entry, the digital nail in my brother's coffin. Message from creator. A copy for the ages commissioned by JS. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a deafening, crushing void of shock and revelation. Every single person in that room, every collector, every critic, every journalist was staring at the irrefutable public proof of a $150 million fraud. Julian looked like his soul had been ripped from his body. My father looked like he might have a heart attack. The empire of Sage built on secrets had just been brought down by a single, indelible truth. In the chaotic aftermath, as guests began to murmur, then to whisper, then to flee the scene as if it were contaminated, I walked off the stage. Sterling met me at the steps with a small, appreciative nod. The performance was over. All that remained was to sign the death certificate. My family cornered me in a small alcove near the exit, away from the worst of the frantic exodus. Their faces, once so formidable, were now stripped bare, revealing the panicked, desperate people underneath. Why, my father whispered, his voice broken. He was a king whose castle had just crumbled into dust around him. Why would you do this to us in public? You could have come to us privately. You've destroyed the family name. I looked at the man who had created me and then unmade me. The anger I had carried for 5 years was gone, replaced by a vast, cold emptiness. The name, I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. You chose that name over your own daughter 5 years ago. You taught me that a reputation, a name, is all that matters in this world. You were right. I just decided to build mine out of something real. Julian. His face pale and slick with sweat, lunged forward, his eyes wild with impotent fury. You'll pay for this, Amara. I swear to God you will pay. No, Julian, I said, looking him squarely in the eye. You're the one who's about to pay. I didn't come here seeking revenge. I came here to do a job. I delivered a professional assessment, which is what I was hired to do. Your choices, your lies, your boundless greed, they were just bad investments that finally came due. My mother, for the first time in her life, looked utterly lost. The smooth social mask was gone, and beneath it was just a frightened woman who had bet on the wrong child. Amara, please, she pleaded. Think of what this will do to us. I looked at the three of them, the patriarch, the prince, and the queen of a fallen house. I felt no triumph, no joy, only a profound and final detachment. I was no longer connected to them. The fire they had thrown me into had burned away all the bonds, all the love, all the pain. You left me to burn 5 years ago, I said to them, my voice the calm at the eye of the storm, and I should thank you for it. I learned that fire isn't just for destruction. You can also use it to forge something new, something stronger. I paused, letting my final word land with the weight of everything I had become. Something true. I turned my back on them for the last time. There was nothing more to say. Their world was imploding, but it was no longer my world. I walked away, not looking back, the sounds of their ruin fading behind me. Kaito Sterling was waiting by the main exit, watching the controlled chaos with an impassive expression. As I approached, a slight, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Impressive, he said, his voice a low murmur. Theatrical, but effective. I've already had my legal team forward the complete data package, your analysis, the blockchain ledger, everything to the art crime division at Interpol and the U.S. Attorney's Office. They'll take it from here. He looked at me with a newfound and genuine respect. They will be very interested in the commission from JS. He checked the time on his platinum watch. Your first official acquisition for the Sterling Foundation is waiting. A private collection in Vienna, the owner is difficult. The jet leaves from Teterboro in an hour. They say the best revenge is living well. I think that's too simple, too neat. The best revenge is not about living well in spite of those who hurt you. It's about allowing the pain to carve you into the person you were always meant to be. The betrayal, the exile, the fire, they weren't obstacles to my life. They were the architects of it. They gave me the clarity to see the world for what it was and the strength to build my own kingdom on a foundation of absolute unyielding truth. I walked out of the Julian Sage Pavilion and into the cool, clean air of the New York night. I was not a ghost returning to haunt a past life. I was a queen leaving a conquered territory, my gaze fixed firmly on the horizon. My name is Amara Sage, and my work was just beginning.